The offseason is here. The playoffs are still going, but the Reds officially in offseason mode, working towards 2026. We'll talk about the news of the day, Terry Francona's staff, and we'll look at some other news that's dropped over the last couple of days coming up on Chatterbox Reds. Welcome in, everybody. I'm Craig Sandlin, joined by Nick Kirby. Nick, how we doing on this Monday morning?
Doing good. Took about 3 days to have some sort of news that was worth posting a video, but yeah, let's roll. Let's have some fun.
Well, you thought you'd have a couple of days off after the season ended, and as they typically do, the Reds give you no time off. Mark Sheldon, the Reds beat reporter for MLB.com, just shortly ago announced that Nick Krall has formally announced that all of Terry Francona's staff has been invited back for 2026. Obviously, the main talking point for many fans was Chris Valaika and his hitting staff, but news now, Nick, that all of the staff will be invited back for 2026.
Yeah, I guess the key word there is invited. I don't necessarily know how many of them are hot commodities outside of a guy like Derek Johnson, who someone absolutely could try to give him a big pay raise and take him away. I don't know who wouldn't be interested in him with kind of what the Reds pitching did, but this isn't surprising. I think people that are acting surprised by this, I don't really know what you were expecting this offseason. I think Jeff Brantley had some comments. I didn't hear the exact wordage on it, just kind of, I think Lance McAllister tweeted out that there's big changes coming this offseason. I think people thought, oh, wow, they're going to fire Valaika, or Nick Krall is going to get fired, or Brad Meter is going to get fired. I did not take it that way. I took it as, oh, they're probably going to try to make some big trades to try to improve the offense. And we'll see. Time will tell, but it seems like Nick Krall's job's safe as if he's making announcements about Terry Francona's coaching staff. Right. I think the two probably coincide together. But yeah, overall, this is not surprising. Craig, I think people will probably make a bigger deal about this than it is. I will say I made it very clear I did not love the whole moving the guys over, playing small ball. I didn't like that talk and that notion. I think most of that, Craig, was more annoying than actually detrimental. I think the bigger issue was the Reds choosing not to play guys that were high strikeout guys that had power and more upside. I think that's the bigger thing. And just like looking at Valaika, how much of an influence does he have? It's impossible for me, you, or anyone that's not in those rooms to really speculate. But what I will say is Matt McLain had a terrible year offensively. He still hit 15 home runs. Spencer Steer was basically not even on the field playing every day in April, and he had 21 home runs. Ellie De La Cruz had 19 home runs on July 31st. Noel Marte jumped from 7 home runs in his first career 101 games to 14 this season. And then if you go back to 2014, Josh Naylor and Jose Ramirez had their career best years in home runs. They didn't match it this past year in 2025. Jose Ramirez has never been close. I think 9 more that season than anywhere else. So does Chris Valaika get credit for that? No. But does Chris Valaika get credit, not get all the blame for the Reds not hitting home runs last year? No. I think, Craig, the only one player that maybe, in my opinion, was a little bit concerning was Gavin Lux. Because Gavin Lux at the end of 2024, the second half, started to really show some power and then showed absolutely none of that in 2025. Was there maybe something that was done with him where they said, oh, we were all about the singles approach, and maybe, but again, I'm not going to make too big of a deal and say that's all Chris Valaika's fault. Overall, I just want to see them play guys that have higher upside that might strike out a little bit. It's okay.
Yeah, I think the thing that was interesting to me, though, Nick, is you look back to when Nick Krall announced that he was firing David Bell, and they really touched on 2 main talking points at that point, one of which was accountability. And, we don't know what happens behind the scenes. We never will. And that's fine. But, you look at guys like Will Benson, who seemed to be punished for things while others went unpunished for similar lack of hustle or whatever it may have been. So that was interesting to me. Not really partaking to the overall coaching staff, but more so to Terry specifically. But then the other piece that Nick Krall talked a lot about was about young players not developing in the way that they expected them to or needed them to in order to be successful. Well, this morning, Charlie Goldsmith released an article, a conversation with Brad Meter and with Nick Krall. And in that, they talked about the biggest path toward improvement will be the young core taking the next step. Internally, some guys need to step up, General Manager Brad Meter said. We need guys to have good off seasons, show back up, ready to go, and show back up, ready to take the next step. We all know we need to take the next step. Part of that is leadership. Some of the guys, the young guys, aren't young anymore. Well, so we had the issue with David Bell's staff about not developing young guys. And now here we are. The first interview we do after the season ends in 2025 is we start talking about young guys not developing again. And so I know you mentioned, obviously, Noelvi Marte had a solid season, and he seemed to take a nice leap forward. But you talk about the regression of, or at least seeming regression of Matt McLain coming back from the shoulder injury, Gavin Lux, amongst some other guys who maybe didn't live up to the potential that you hoped for. How much of that falls on this coaching staff? How much of it falls on the guys being ready? Because Nick Krall right now seemingly is putting a lot of that weight on the young players to come back ready in 2026. And we obviously talked about it at the end of the season that guys like Sal Stewart, right, who I think is the first baseman of the future, now that he has this entire offseason ahead of him where he knows, okay, he's going to be a first baseman and that's the position I need to prepare for the most, he can go and use this offseason to get ready for that. But that's not necessarily him not being prepared coming in. That's just not what he was asked to do coming into 2025. But now that he knows his role, he can go and do that. And certainly that'll be part of the path towards improvement. But I think this general conversation around guys not improving, when you say that that's the number one path to improvement, is kind of a little bit of a catch-22 after what we just talked about last season, and that being one of the main reasons you moved away from David Bell.
Yeah, it's hard too, because, you know, how much of it is just players not having a good year, how much of it was like Matt McLain's injury, how much of it was Spencer Steer's injury, how much of it was this, that, and the other. Ironically enough, outside of Noelvi Marte, the guys that probably improved the most at the top of the organization were Will Benson, who didn't play much down the stretch, was Rhys Hines. I don't think people gave enough credit to the incredible changes that Rhys Hines made to go from a average at best player at AAA in 2024 that had the greatest week of his life in the big leagues to actually being a really, really good player at AAA all year. And Blake Dunn, who didn't make the Reds postseason roster, had an incredible turnaround late in the season. So, yeah, I don't know how much of that is that. The Reds obviously do need players to have big off seasons for sure. They also need to add talent as well. I think that's probably that's probably a bigger issue than that. But a lot of the whole conversation, I wonder how much of the truth, and we'll never know the answer to this, but I wonder how much of the hitting for contact conversation is really just their way of very poorly, Craig, trying to mask the fact that they just don't have the ability or choose to spend the money on hitters that have power, because that costs a lot of money. So that's where it's hard for me. I want to see the Reds have an aggressive offseason looking to add offense, but I'm also very bullish on a lot of these young players taking a step next season. And we'll talk about it a lot later on this week when we do a depth chart show. But I'm going to show you, I think, some reasons why there's real hope that the players that the Reds have now could lead to a lot more wins just next year on their own. Not an excuse not to be aggressive this offseason, but a reason, I think, for some hope.
Well, I think the Reds will need it, because I think there's probably a lot of folks not necessarily realizing how many holes are going to be opened on this team during the offseason that will need to be addressed. And some of these guys may return to the Reds next year, but free agents, Emilio Pagan, Nick Martinez, Zach Littell, Miguel Andujar, all unrestricted free agents. Then you have guys like Austin Hayes, who has a mutual option, which I think we're in agreement that will not be picked up at $12 million. And then the Reds also have options on guys like Scott Barlow and Brent Suter. I don't know. Maybe Brent Suter gets picked up at $3 million. I think that's probably a little bit of an overpay, but I think they like him in the clubhouse and in the community. Scott Barlow, I think, is around $6.5 million. That feels unlikely to be picked up, but maybe they renegotiate a way to bring him back. Either way, there's a lot of holes, especially in this bullpen. And so whether it be through free agency or through some of the depth that you'll talk about in an upcoming show, the Reds are going to have their work cut out for them. And with a budget that is unknown at this point, not only to us, but also to them, there's going to have to be some creativity that happens in order to build on the success of 2025. So we'll see what happens. And certainly, as always, Chatterbox the Reds will be here to take you through the entire offseason. As news breaks, we'll be here with all the rumors, all the signings, and everything else that happens. Speaking of which, Nick, some news that kind of snuck under the radar over the last seemingly couple of months didn't really get picked up until late last week or over the weekend.
There is nothing better than October baseball and grilling out, and I use Omaha Steaks for all my grilling needs. And now during their early Black Friday sale event, you can get 50% off site-wide, plus an extra 20% off select favorites, and our listeners get $35 off with promo code Chatterbox. It's so great to have steaks, hamburgers, and gourmet hot dogs always in my freezer, ready to go. It's so convenient for me to go online and order. I like the value freezer filler package to stay stocked up. The steaks are perfectly aged, hand-cut, and USDA certified tender. The burgers are mouth-watering and grass-fed, but don't sleep on the gourmet hot dogs. They are seriously the best hot dogs I've ever had. Plus, they also carry chicken, pork, seafood, and fantastic desserts. Save big with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off select favorites during their early Black Friday sale. And for an extra $35 off, use promo code Chatterbox at checkout. Terms apply. See site for details. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com. Promo code Chatterbox at checkout.
Former Red Curt Casali officially retired as a player for Major League Baseball and has assumed a role in the Reds front office that hasn't necessarily been announced. We don't really know what's going on with that, right?
Yeah, fascinating reporting. This was just like buried in the bottom of an article from Susan Slusser, a writer for the San Francisco Giants. I think she used to also do the Oakland A's, but she's out in California. But it was literally just buried in an article. Curt Casali retired and he joined the Reds. He already had joined the Reds front office, so that's interesting. No idea what his role is. I always liked Curt Casali. I thought he was a very intelligent player. Had some sneaky, really good years for the Reds in 2019 and 2020. Go look. He was like a half a win player in 2020 in that 60-game season, playing like 20 games. Like he was actually pretty good. I think he's a good guy to have around. How much of an influence, how big of a role, we don't know. But I did always like Curt Casali. That's basically my only takeaway from this. But I think it's good to sometimes get some of these forward players. A guy Caleb Cotham that the Reds had, they let get away and ended up doing really good things outside of the Reds organization. So good to have players like that stick around.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see exactly what that role ends up being, Nick. I think there's some conversation about, is he potentially a future manager candidate? You look at guys like Joe Girardi and David Ross, who transitioned from being major league catchers into being major league managers. And there's kind of a trend right now of former major league catchers turning into managers and coaches, and that leadership and that knowledge of the game kind of translating into that role. But then on the other side, a guy who Curt Casali backed up, Buster Posey, is now the president of baseball operations in San Francisco. And so there's kind of two paths here that could be interesting to see what Curt takes. Does he go front office role and kind of try to be similar to Buster Posey, where he takes over some baseball operations management, or does he go the other way? And there's some rumors now that maybe he's a candidate for the San Francisco Giants managerial role already. Does he go and try and be in the dugout again? Again, with the limited knowledge, we really don't know what to expect, but certainly something to keep your eye on over the course of this offseason and how Curt Casali kind of transitions into this role, and if he stays with the Reds long term. Any final thoughts on Curt Casali?
No, David Bell actually was the Giants vice president for 2 years before he became the Reds manager. And AJ Hinch, another good catcher example of a guy who's had a lot of success as a big league manager. Had maybe if we think our Reds had a roller coaster season, the Tigers have had twice as much. But hey, they're still alive, and AJ Hinch is one of I think the better managers in the sport, despite that collapse that they've survived.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll keep an eye on that, and if there's news there, we'll share it. One other thing I wanted to touch on real quick, Nick, late addition to the Arizona Fall League roster for the Cincinnati Reds. I love this move, but Rhett Lowder officially added to the AFL roster for the Reds.
The only thing I care about is if he stays healthy through the whole AFL. I don't care if he has an ERA of 50. If he's healthy at the end, that's a great thing. That is a great sign that he was able to pitch and stay healthy. And that makes you feel confident that he'll be ready for 2025. But this is also an opportunity. I don't want to say opportunity. It's also a test, I guess, to see how he's doing, and if he's not ready and needs to get surgery, and then that could certainly push back his 2026 obviously is what I meant. We don't want to replay 2025 again. But yeah, no, I think this is great that he's pitching. And when you talk about something we'll get into a lot more later this week, when you talk about reasons for optimism for the Reds, the first thing everyone's going to say is the pitching's going to regress. The pitching's going to regress. The pitching's going to regress. Well, Chase Burns did not have much of an impact on the 2025 team. Wasn't even necessarily that great in his overall starts, although we certainly saw flashes of it. And Rhett Lowder didn't pitch at all. That can make up quite a bit of the difference.
And you're not even mentioning Brandon Williamson and Julian Aguiar, both of which missed all of 25 with Tommy John surgery. So potentially getting those two back as well when you come back into 2026 and competing for a rotation spot. And now all of a sudden you're talking about the potential for some really good depth at that position. And obviously anything can happen, which is why we were so optimistic about the depth that the Reds had going into 2025, is because when things like this happen, you have the next man ready to step up. And luckily for the Reds in 2025, that worked out in their favor, and they were able to have next man up, and Chase Burns got some valuable innings, although maybe not as much as we would have liked. But certainly will be something to keep our eye on. And I'm trying to pull it up real quick. I had an update on that recently. Carson Spires also had Tommy John. He is expected to be kind of out at least well into 2026. Brandon Williamson was in rehab, but then his program got kind of throttled back in August due to some soreness, and I'm sure he's in a throwing program, but we haven't really gotten an update then from them since then. And then Julian Aguiar started to throw bullpens in August, so he's expected to be ready in the spring unless there's any sort of setback as well. But for those of you that missed it, obviously Rhett Lowder went into spring training, had a right elbow issue in spring training, missed a couple months, and then in May during a rehab assignment experienced a oblique strain that knocked him out for a significant period of time. Not until September did he begin a rehab assignment, but just after one start was scratched in his second start due to poor recovery and discomfort in his shoulder. And then now here we are in October. Rhett Lowder will be pitching in the Arizona Fall League, and we're looking forward to that. And I respect what you're saying, Nick, but Rhett Lowder will be far and away the best pitcher in the Arizona Fall League this year. And he's going up against players who, for the most part, are single and double A players. Like, he realistically should dominate that league. Now, I'm not going to judge him based on the outcome, but I also don't want people to get overly excited if he leaves there with like a 1.2 ERA, because he's not going up against major league talent in that league. So both ways, right? At the end of the day, get work in, make sure you're healthy, and be ready for the spring, but also don't overreact. Like, yes, Rhett Lowder should dominate that league. So if he does, and he does what he should do, let's not jump the gun and act like he's going to be a Cy Young candidate for 2026. All right. Final thoughts on Arizona Fall League?
No, just excited. I do believe I I read all games are available for free to stream on MLB.com. So I think every stadium now has some sort of system. I think some are better than others, but you should be able to watch all of those. We'll certainly do our best to keep you updated on our socials. Chatterbox Sports on X, Twitter will probably be the best way. We'll try to throw up some highlights and stuff when we are able to find them, and then we'll obviously have some discussions. I know a few people that will probably be down in the Arizona Fall League. I will try, maybe as we did last year, to try to get in touch with them and get some in-person reports, which was really cool. We got some good stuff last year with Jack McMullen, who was down there. But he might be too big for us now. He's now the Miami Marlins broadcaster, Craig. So we might be going to the next big thing in broadcasting.
Big time. I could be mistaken, Nick, but I think that yesterday was opening day for the Arizona Fall League. So we should be getting some updates. I
believe it's
or
today.
is it today?
I think it's the 6th. I think it's the 6th. Rhett Lowder, there was something that was circulated, said Rhett Lowder threw 2 innings, but the first game is October 6th. So, but that must have been like a backfield game or something. But yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
we'll keep an eye. We'll keep an eye on it. I'm not 100% sure. But we'll obviously bring you updates on social media as soon as we have them. Make sure you follow us on social media at CBox Sports on all platforms. And then obviously right here on YouTube, Nick, myself, Trace, and the gang will be sure to bring you updates as soon as they're available. And we'll talk about that. But Nick, we've got some other exciting shows planned for coming up for this off season. You want to break it down and what to expect for everybody?
Yeah, open in the next 2 weeks. On Tuesday morning, we're planning on doing a full Reds offseason calendar breakdown, talk about everything this offseason, and give you the details of every player that's a free agent, the contract decisions, have a little bit of discussion about that, qualifying offers, some non-tender candidates who could be non-tendered, some of the arbitration things that'll be interesting. So we'll break all of that down. And then we're going to do probably later this week a full breakdown of the Reds depth chart going into 2026, who they have now and kind of how that might shake out, and kind of where the Reds need to add and where might be a little better than you think. Then we'll also plan on doing at some point here in the near future a episode just breaking down some of the free agent targets from the absolute dream list to more of the realistic targets. And then after we have a little bit more time to fully digest the season, we'll try to do a very fair and balanced show grading Terry Francona's first year as manager. But I need a little bit more time to kind of let the season digest, as I want to do a fair analysis of it. The good, because there was some good. It wasn't all completely bad, but we'll certainly discuss some of the challenges this season as well.
I'll save my thoughts for that one for a later day. All right. Until then, next time we'll see you is Tuesday, it sounds like. We'll have a video for you tomorrow if you're watching this on Monday. If you're watching this on Tuesday, maybe it's already out. Check it out. It'll be live on YouTube at Chatterbox Sports. Make sure you check it out there. And I'm sure we'll post a link on our social media pages as well. Make sure you subscribe, like, and follow for all the notifications on Chatterbox Sports and Cincinnati sports teams. For Nick Kirby, I'm Craig Sandlin. This has been Chatterbox Reds. We'll see you next time.
Deep South Commodities is a proud supporter of Chatterbox Reds and our Deep Drive of the Day, and DSC is a leader in renewable commodities for biofuel production, specializing in used cooking oil collection, aggregation, and sales. Visit www.deepsouthcommodities.com for more information. Thanks, as always, to our friends at DSC. And we also want to remind you that you can call or text 988 anytime, day or night. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is a place to get support for anything related to mental health. Whether it's an immediate crisis, simply wanting to find out how to connect with care, or anything in between, it's a 100% confidential, secure, and anonymous way to reach out for help when you don't know where else to turn. To connect, call or text 988 or visit mantherapy.org to get help. It's okay not to be okay.